So hello everyone. Just an FYI, this is being recorded, just because we do have a couple of people that are looking for the recording, and obviously you can have it afterwards as well. So yeah,
so I know. So firstly, thank you so much for joining our webinar this morning. I think this is a topic that definitely has been brought up quite a lot over the past few months, and it's a question that a lot of our clients and candidates are speaking to us about in terms of, scale ups and implementing HR functions and growth of business within these businesses. So it really is a hot topic, and it's one that we thought we would put a webinar together about. And we're joined by the lovely Kirsty Day, who's going to be talking to us about her journey and the challenges that she has faced as well.
If you have any questions throughout, please do pop them in the little Q&A box. I don't know whereabouts it is on your screen, but if you pop your questions in, and obviously we'll go through it at the end. We have put an hour aside for this webinar. We're not anticipating it's going to take the full hour. Obviously it may do with all the questions, but we're probably looking at about half an hour to 45 minutes. If we just give a quick introduction to ourselves, we are the One Group. We have over 50 specialist recruitment consultants, and we have 4 offices: Cambridgeshire, Northampton, Peterborough, and we have a new office that we've recently opened in Hertfordshire.
The areas that we cover, so we do accountancy and finance, we do HR, we do IT, marketing, office support, sales, and technical as well.
Quite a bit. I'm trying to remember them all.
I know.
But not only obviously do we support with recruitment, just wanted to touch upon the fact that we do a little bit more. We do actually partner with our clients in the sense of we do exclusive partnerships, so that could be supporting with salary benchmarking, looking at the top benefits that are out at the moment, attraction, retention, workforce planning, much more. So yes, we do the recruitment side of it, but we also do the beyond recruitment aspects as well. Quickly on to us. I'm Danielle. Hi. I am one of the HR consultants here at the One Group. Probably been doing it now for about 5 years. I did do a couple of years in IT, so I'm well in the know when it comes to kind of working with startups, scale ups, software engineers, data people, and then obviously kind of moved across to the HR function about a year ago now. Is it a year? Yeah, just over a year ago. So I've been doing HR for the past year, and I've been at the One Group for about 2 years, just over 2 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I'm Lucy. I have been at the One Group for nearly 10 years, and I've been working in recruitment for 18 years. For my age there. So my background has been very kind of commercial. I've worked within office, PR, communications, marketing, and HR. So currently I'm more kind of HR and office. And we've been doing this definitely, I think, together for about a year now, which has been fantastic. And yes, again, we have worked with all kind of different sizes of businesses. I mean, Cambridge is an absolute minefield when it comes to that, isn't it? Which is fantastic. So that's just a bit about us. So I think on that note, we will hand over to the lovely Kirsty.
Thanks folks. Appreciate it. Yes, so I'm Kirsty Day, and I am the Global People Director here at TechSpert. We are an AI tech scale-up based in Cambridge. So these are our headquarters, which I'm sitting in right now. And then we also have a number of other offices, one in Houston. We have individuals in the Netherlands, Brazil, etc. So yes, absolutely. I've been here for nearly will be 4 years in March next year. Okay, so just over 3 years. So yes, absolutely. So yeah, there we go.
So with regards to this webinar, obviously Lucy did touch upon it beforehand. The topic of this webinar is something that we are asked all the time in regards to advice and sort of some guidance. So we just thought, let's do a webinar on it. So there are going to be a couple of topics we're going to be discussing. What is HR? What value can it bring to your organisation at whatever size you are? Are you thinking of scaling up? Great. how can HR and your people function support this? And then we're going to delve a little bit into the difference between HR and talent acquisition. Who do you need to bring in first? But we're going to touch upon those. The reason why we have asked Kirsty to join us is so that she can talk about her journey at TechSpert, how she has implemented certain processes, and just talk to us about that journey. So yeah, Kirsty, go ahead. Let's start. So you joined TechSpert, didn't you, initially in a talent?
March, yeah, absolutely. So actually my kind of HR journey really started 13 years ago. Believe it or not, it's kind of, yeah, I think that dates me somewhat. But basically I initially worked for UK Trade and Investment as a kind of HR team lead and under a kind of shared services contract. Right. So the contract very much kind of aligned with elections, and the contract therefore changed hands every 3 years. So every 3 years you'd be going through 2P, which after a bit of time you lose the mojo for. Yeah. And so I was at PA Consulting, yet another one actually at Christmas of all times was taking place, and so I decided to move on and basically just couldn't do it again. So I moved on to a called a Crystal Graphic tech charity in the centre of Cambridge, and then on to DP Connect, where I work with you, Danny. And we did, and then from there moved on to TechSpert, which interestingly, actually, I was primarily kind of employed to recruit, but with kind of an HR people edge, and then very quickly that kind of balance shifted. And the kind of the HR element really kind of took off as the company scaled. So I joined when there was 20, and there's now globally just under 80, and then we're kind of scaling on from there as well. So it's really kind of grown as the business has grown. Yeah.
So when you joined on that sort of balance, obviously doing a bit of both of them, did it become quite apparent early on what kind of function needed more love?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, I think we're going to be coming across kind of and talking much more about kind of challenges and what that's really going to look like. I think when we're actually looking at what HR and kind of people really mean as well, I think that this kind of really kind of feeds into it. Being in any kind of people-centric position, it's actually about being that kind of advocate for being really an organization's most expensive but valuable resource, and really without your people you've kind of got nothing. I mean, it kind of goes without saying. I think historically HR and people has been kind of seen as kind of like a tea and tissues kind of outfit, as I kind of refer to it. But actually what we're really kind of seeing now is a kind of fundamental shift in really kind of how industries view HR. Kind of there's many more seats at kind of board level. It's becoming much more data driven, and being confident in those kind of data driven changes as well. So it's kind of really about kind of acknowledging across all areas that unless you kind of get the people element right, the organization's going to trip. And that's a kind of a really big piece when really looking at kind of what kind of comes first. But I'm happy to kind of dive into a bit more detail about that as well, about that kind of what comes first, HR, talent, and what kind of needs to kind of underpin that. I don't know if that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, it would be perfect. Thank you. Okay, so just going back on, you mentioned it earlier. I don't know if I'm jumping the gun slightly, but you did mention challenges. What sort of challenges did you face?
Absolutely. So some of the challenges, I think I can kind of like segment this up into some of the kind of scaling challenges and then kind of specific challenge that we face. I don't know, would that be useful? I don't know. Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. So when really looking at kind of scale up challenges, if you speak to anybody, when actually looking at it from a people stance, maintaining culture, so presuming it's a kind of strong and positive, engaging and behavior driven culture, that's actually one of the most tricky paths to tread. actually kind of, it's very well known kind of in HR circles that as you kind of hit bigger bumps in the road, when you kind of hit those kind of points of kind of 50 and then 100 employee mark, and so being able to understand how you partner with your your executives and how you navigate those is kind of really key as well. I think another area as well is about being able to keep pace. So what I mean by that is it's incredibly fast paced, especially kind of in the tech industry. So you just look at kind of the takeover of AI, this has been kind of headline news for some time, but it's still very fresh and everybody's still kind of really interested and engaged by that. So really being able to pivot and retain that core focus is quite a skill. I think also the working world framework, let's kind of call it that, has changed so much over the recent years. Let's kind of, the not elephant in the room, but the kind of the hybrid working expectations has really tilted the world of work. And from a kind of people focus, we need to be able to move kind of seamlessly into this kind of remote first model. So setting those community-based communication platforms, and having that kind of buy-in from everyone. So that kind of clearly setting expectations around conduct, just how meetings are held, time zone accountability. But actually that's really kind of driven us to review our benefits as well. I mean, I think if we were looking at us specifically, one piece that kind of happened to us as a kind of organization is about just over a year ago, we brought on a new COO and CFO to partner with our CEO, who's the founder, and our CTO, who'd been with us for quite some time. And naturally, quite rightly, the landscape changed at that time. But I think that what we didn't shy away from were these changes. So it was an opportunity really for us to be able to reevaluate those at the table, and to create a kind of a new senior leadership team, but also kind of bring that cadence. So kind of working on that kind of leadership charter. So what that meant was that we kind of brought in a kind of a senior leadership trainer and kind of coach who has really been kind of instrumental at bringing alignment at that kind of top level. So it's about bringing unity to our kind of behaviors, setting those kind of collective kind of expectations with the team, but also the wider company. So just being transparent. And actually we've just launched or about to launch, surprise if anybody from TechSpert is watching this, our leadership feedback survey. So what we're going to be doing is aligning this with our 360 peer-to-peer feedback, which feeds into our biannual review process. So I think it's about not losing that voice of the kind of employees. When we scale from 20 to the late 70s, it's very easy to lose that. Everybody just kind of pulls up a beanbag through to, okay, we don't want everybody to kind of lose your voice. So if you don't give those kind of wider teams a platform to be able to communicate transparently but confidentially, and then ultimately being able to kind of communicate that kind of strategic narrative, and ultimately being able to kind of get behind the journey, where we're going, what we're doing, and for them to be able to have that kind of safe pair of hands. So we're continually looking at those kind of different touch points as well within the kind of the employee voice.
As you've kind of because it's really interesting to hear how you kind of the changes and challenges you face as you scale up, and as you go from a really small business to that kind of 70. I mean, were there any kind of specific examples that you could provide in terms of any challenges that you came across, or case studies where you've had to kind of change almost the path that you've been following to kind of adapt? Because like you said, it's a very different kind of way of working, and how did everybody adapt to that change throughout that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And so kind of that leadership piece that I've just been discussing is very much kind of one of those. And so being able to kind of really assess the lay of the land. Also, interestingly, so we have 70% of our clients are actually based out of the US. So we were obviously kind of very, not obviously, but we were Cambridge centric. You know, our two co-founders both lived in Cambridge, and this is very much kind of our headquarters. But it became very obvious that we needed to be able to have that time zone adhered to, kind of, you know, dealt with and kind of managed and serviced. And so we did, it was 2 years ago this April, we set up and opened our first US office out of Houston, Texas. And so we're actually just recruiting back into that team at the moment. And actually one group was great at really being able to support us. I remember having these kind of conversations with you and saying, so how do you feel about recruiting in the States? They're like, yes, absolutely, we can do anything. And in fact, to be fair, you did. Well, you did. You absolutely supported us with that. So that was great. But actually then really looking at the culture. So globalization is a huge issue, not an issue, but that's kind of something that everybody's talking about, especially when we're looking at the kind of the weakening pound and what that's kind of looking like across the globe. So actually being able to look, you know, and being able to actually looking at servicing that, and also being able to understand the kind of financial modeling that were going behind that as well. So yeah, that was something that and it's been great, but also being able to really have that synergy between the UK and the US. And I think that something that we did get wrong was actually being able to, having that kind of expectation where we'd just be able to have that complete unity, but we needed to be able to have these micro cultures as well. So of course we're all aligned, you know, got code of conduct, we've got our values, we've got the behaviors that underpin the values. Of course, that's kind of 101, but then being able to not being able to embrace the kind of the micro cultures within each of the offices. So our US team have just last week had their first volunteer day. They went down to a food bank and they kind of volunteered there and got together, and but this was something local. That's not something that we probably could have set it up from the UK, but we know what is actually important. And we've got I've got Yvonne, who's our people and operations generalist out there, and she just works brilliantly with the team, and, you know, kind of works and kind of getting these kind of collective teams, and actually also commuting as well. A bigger scale in the States, you know, and the ability to kind of being able to come in and things. So, you know, as we look at kind of being able to set those offices and expectations, being able to understand the different distances and the nuances, that's only something that can really be understood when you're actually on the ground on a day-to-day basis. So
yeah, I mean, we've just had a question from Chris Eason, who obviously you know. He's just put, did you find the USA recruitment more challenging than the UK, or not, just different challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because of the way that you engage just actually fundamentally with candidates. So in the US, for instance, you don't have employment contracts. You actually have you have a completely different setup. Notice periods. It's much more at what's called an at-will basis. So we also, you know, PTO, pay time off, you pretty much you get hardly any in the States. So we therefore aligned our benefits with the UK. So we had 33 days. We have, which is quite standard in the UK. That's nothing, but that's quite extraordinary out in the States. And then obviously like PSL, so that's sick leave, and actually being able to have that, parental leave, maternity leave. I mean, it's quite eye-opening when you start digging into kind of the employment law. You know, we could go into kind of the Roe versus Wade and all of that, and being able to support our team, that whole piece. But actually, when you come down to hiring, thanks, Chris, for that. It was much, well, I don't know, necessarily challenging, because it was just different. And so being able to make sure that initially we were kind of people contacted us with skepticism, because the way that we actually were set up, we were techspert.io, and people necessarily thought that we were, I don't know, widgets, or that we were, you know, that we were some sort of flaky organization. So then actually being able to establish ourselves and actually make sure that we were credible when actually engaging. And as always, I think it's always quite daunting as an employee to be one of those first employees in another country as well. It's quite a kind of a leap of faith, but it's really paid off, and they're a fabulous bunch.
Okay. And did you find it more, did you find people in the US were more attractive to Techspert because of the things that you were offering to try and keep that alignment between the UK office and the benefits and the US office with the benefits, so they're not separate? Did you find that you were a bit more attractive in the market?
Absolutely, yeah.
Technology in the business, but also the sort of the things that you were offering as a business.
Absolutely, no, for sure. And I think that's kind of really what kind of got us off the ground, really, was our benefits. And then you kind of throw in, you know, training, and you throw in, like I said, maternity, paternity, and also the flexibility. We have the kind of flexibility to be able to work abroad as well. So just being able to kind of bend and flex, you know, hardly any of us have kind of family nearby, so being able for them to be able to kind of travel out of state, etc., you know, has been really kind of a really kind of big enticement. But I think also the challenges there are aligning kind of employee expectations and benefits, so employment handbooks, making sure that we are, you know, at that kind of alignment as well. But then when we're looking at that kind of global growth, it's, you know, we've got to be able to really kind of understand, you know, we've got the Netherlands, we've got Brazil, we've got to be able to make sure that everything, kind of the expectations are aligned and fair. So yeah,
of course. So you mentioned that obviously people can work abroad whenever they want. You've already mentioned that Techspert is a remote first company. Were you always a remote first, or did COVID play a part in that? Did that
honestly, yeah. I mean, I was in the office for 2 weeks before we had our first lockdown. And then, I mean, literally, I mean, our tech team, I would say, is 90% remote. And our hybrid working framework is that we've got, I think we've got, well, we basically have expectations of 1 day a week in the office. And, you know, but that also has been able to bring flexibility to people as well. So if, you know, we've got a number of kind of early careers that kind of want to go and work, for instance, or go live rather closer to London, want to go and live with their friends, well, that's great, because it's easy for you to kind of jump on the train and come up here. And so also to be able to, you know, it's given much more flexibility, but it's also, you know, that communication piece.
Must come with like some sort
of course, absolutely. I mean, we had our retreat recently, our UK retreat, and we also had our US one as well. And getting everybody together, you can't really get away from having a face-to-face contact and actually building those relationships. And that's so valuable, so valuable. So we just brought everybody together. It was just brilliant. And actually just everybody being on the same page, aligning around strategy. And actually what we also did was, one of our sessions was actually around, let's kind of call it personality profiling. So understanding where we all sit on this particular grid that we'd been kind of coached in through this leadership coach, and then being able to understand different ways in which we all engage as a kind of company, so we can actually approach each other, not differently, but with awareness, has been really impactful, especially when we're looking at kind of external engagement as well. So it was really valuable. As well as the disco and drinks at the end, which is hilarious.
So when you're implementing that HR function, I think, what do you kind of prioritize? Because obviously you've talked about the leadership and the coaching, you've talked about the strategy, there's the L&D side of things as well. I mean, how do you kind of prioritize what's kind of needed to implement that core function? And then obviously you can look at that growth period, whether that be in HR or the rest of the business. How would you initially approach that kind of strategy as to how you design that team?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, honestly, this is a bit of kind of like a chicken or an egg question. What comes first? I think the answer really is where the organization is at in its kind of scaling journey. So are you consolidating or are you expanding? So kind of if you're looking at that kind of consolidation, and you're looking at kind of creating value, it's about kind of creating that value-driven culture. So again, where that you've got that accountability around kind of behaviours, and that's again kind of driven by L&D, kind of training programs, looking at that kind of succession programming and kind of cross-team mentoring, whilst keeping an eye on what we kind of refer to as kind of like that North Star, as I call it, where you're going, what that kind of strategic direction is. So having that kind of transparency over that kind of strategic plan and who is going to get there, who's going to get you there really, and how you're going to get there. So I think retention right now is not a new word, so I'm sure to anybody sitting on this call, especially for those of us that have kind of tech colleagues. I mean, they're eye-wateringly in demand. So having kind of like an HR generalist initially here would be key. I mean, of course, this is going without saying, kind of setting up, you know, policies, processes, all that kind of, you know, alignment with employment law. I mean, it all just, like I said, kind of goes without saying. However, if you are expanding, so if we're talking again specifically about kind of scale-ups and startups, etc., so you can maybe have closed funding, or you know, you're looking at that kind of globalization piece. So you know, let's kind of take globalization. You know, we've got rising costs here in the UK. We're all, you know, we're in the kind of, not the depths, but we're coming out of recession. Again, it's about kind of understanding that North Star. So really looking at those kind of areas of business that kind of drive that value. So looking at the delivery, but also your kind of blockers and kind of stumbling blocks of your teams. So when looking again at globalization piece, looking at that kind of EOR, PEO models out there, understanding the value that they can bring and how they can support this. So whilst I think it would be obvious to say, bring in a TA here, also bringing in, again, that kind of HR generalist. So somebody that's kind of got the background and talent, who can align with your kind of executives, or align with your strategic plan, champion that culture. I keep on referencing culture, but this is, you know,
it's so important.
But it's generally, they're going to like being carefully maintained, and you want somebody that can kind of champion both. And of course, partnering with agencies is also helpful. I mean, I think if we kind of talk about TOG specifically, you know, you have partnered with me and my team kind of over the years. So, you know, not only have you know, we've recruited some really kind of great senior hires in the UK tech employees. We've also, our first Netherlands employee, as well as building out the US team, which we referenced already, has really been key. So I think also making sure that you partner with the right agency for you. I certainly have been burnt by kind of the classic agencies that, or individuals that kind of overpromise and underdeliver. I mean, it's a classic. So
okay. So just having a quick look at the Q&A box before we just kind of go on an overview of the topics. So someone has raised a question of what challenges could startups face when looking at their people function.
Absolutely. So I think kind of some of the bigger challenges is really kind of just understanding where you're going and what you're doing. So that prioritization, I think initially it'll be really easy to kind of sprint out of the starting blocks, but actually doing a really kind of in-depth assessment of where you are and what you need, and do a kind of gap analysis really. And again, sitting down with your C-suite, sitting down with your founder, understanding where they're going, what that kind of direction is, what their strategic, thinking about the different funding points, you know, if we're thinking about, you know, kind of various different kind of touch points of the journey, what they need to look like, and where they need to go, and understanding where you need to be. So actually then being able to have somebody that can come in and actually do that partnering piece, and actually have the strength of knowledge and conviction to be able to drive that forwards. So being able to understand that big plan, but also being able to do, I mean, sometimes it's kind of just called the drudgery work, you know, like I said, you can't get away from having the right processes and policies. You know, it sounds dreadful, but things like, you know, kind of having that disciplinary process, it sounds, you know, when you don't need it, that's great. But ultimately, if you don't have it and you do need it, that's when you can come unstuck.
Yeah. So, I mean, just touching upon kind of at what point, like obviously we've discussed talent or HR in the sense of, you know, what chicken and egg, what should come first. But if they're a startup, scale up, they are thinking of implementing a people function, whether it be via talent or HR, but what advice would you give from experience at Expert, and obviously from working beforehand with organisations, what point do you think, okay, so do we actually need a people function at this point? Are we in that position? Should we be bringing them in when there's just 3 of us? Should we be bringing someone in when there's 5, 10, 15, 20? What do you know? Do you have any advice that, okay, so this is where we're at as a business, maybe we should then start looking at it?
So there's lots of kind of different thoughts. I don't think there's any one right answer to this. I think initially when you're kind of a small startup, hopefully you won't need anything, but actually there are HR consultancies out there and they can do they can literally kind of parachute in and to be able to give you that support. I think that once you get to kind of double figures, you need to be able to think about either having somebody in part-time. I mean, obviously once you've had an employee for 2 years or less, it's much easier to be able to do that management of the employee journey, and to be able to kind of set those expectations out. However, you know, one wrong word and discrimination can be easily thrown about, so you do still have to be quite careful, and you can easily trip, especially with colleagues that aren't necessarily nuanced and sensitive to different ways and the wrong ways to kind of engage, etc. So probably double figures, but you do need to be able to be partnering with an HR consultancy and to be able to have that. And there's a number of kind of options in and around Cambridge as well. There are.
I was just going to say, we've had a question from a lovely Nicola North, who said, how would you recommend handling a CEO? So this is kind of moving away from what we can talk about a little bit, but how would you recommend handling a CEO who is determined to mandate 3 days in the office when some people work fully remotely locally? And actually, this is a question we're coming up against so much. That flexibility that so many people have had for such a long time seems to be changing now.
It does.
So, and in a startup,
there is that one in office presence, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, but most startups that we have dealt with have probably been more flexible to kind of allow that remote working. But I think gradually we're just seeing a change, and they really want that visibility in the office. I mean, what would you say to that?
So I think kind of understanding both sides. So why does the CEO want them to come back? So sitting down and actually really understanding it. If it is just about kind of bringing everybody back in and building that culture, well, in a kind of office-based first, but there are other different ways of doing that as well. I think the big thing and the big pushback would be, okay, so we're delivering more at home. Actually, quite a lot of people are finding that they're being more effective at home because they're not getting the distraction that they're getting. I think it's also dependent on where you're at in your career. So being quite general, early years careers, individuals actually suffer much more with kind of isolation, and actually also kind of distraction as well at being at home. And so kind of being able to come in and being able to have that teamwork, camaraderie has been really kind of impactful. However, it's very much around sitting with the CEO and understanding that. Maybe also depends on how flexible that they're willing to be. If they're wanting to mandate that, then being able to understand what that looks like in the teams, being able to set those expectations out with the team leads and being able to champion them to be able to deliver the communication, but having that alignment across the whole senior leadership is key. And also for having, if there are individuals that are pushing back, then you need to understand what the context is and why you're pushing back, and to be able to have that safe dialogue, and to be able to kind of bend and flex. I mean, maybe it doesn't need to be 3, maybe it could be 2. What does that actually really look like? But if he's pushing hard and he's a co-founder, it's
it's a difficult situation, isn't it?
But no, again, it's not one size fits all. But again, I love coming into the office. I love seeing people. But that's, I'm a people person. And so, I mean, I've got people in tech who would rather walk over hot coals than come in and say, and I get that, and that's fine. So.
Well, it's like we have flexible working, isn't it? And I'm in every day.
I mean, I love being in the office,
working from
but I need that flexibility because I have a young family, and it's nice just to have that option there. Just to know that you obviously you do want visibility in the office sometimes, but just having that kind of ability to have that hybrid working, I think, is such an attractive benefit, really, isn't it?
Well, I think so. And actually through COVID, we completely redesigned and re-outfitted our office. So now we actually have hot desks and we actually have a hot desk booking system. So we use Slack as our internal communication platform, and actually then we got something called Officely, which is very minimal cost, and actually then you can actually book out desks, which has been great, because then any one person can see at any one day who from their team is going to be in. So we have, people in operations are going to be in, we're going to be in every Tuesday. So, we bring in the finance team, we've got my ops colleagues, we've got the people team, we're all coming in, and we can see who's going to be in, as well as, okay, so, this Tuesday, the C-suite are going to be in as well, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's kind of great, not quite nice to be able to understand the kind of also the different water cooler chats you could have.
So hopefully that helps, Nicola. But yeah, it's a bit difficult depending on how forceful that recommendation is coming from the CEO. So hopefully that was helpful. Just touching back very quickly on, you mentioned that you use Slack to kind of communicate. With regards to kind of platforms and that, how did you go about kind of looking at what platforms to bring in for a people sort of aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started, our HRIS was People HR, but actually it didn't, when I was kind of referencing back to that kind of data-driven insights, it really wasn't giving me the support that I needed. So we actually moved over to Bamboo HR, and they've got really kind of great. So this is, again, we've been able to drive many more insights. So we have an EMPS, different surveys, we've got well-being touch points, and it's been, we've been able to kind of look and do kind of analytics around retention, and a whole range of kind of different pieces, as well as kind of setting up workflows. So that's been a kind of a game changer for us, and we set that up in February last year. And that has been great. We also were primarily, as our kind of internal communication, we had Slack, but we also use Notion, and we're now using SharePoint much more as well, to be able to really sit and lock those kind of policies. So we are a compliance team as well, because we can kind of bring that in and be able to have much more cadence. So we've recently just built an intranet as well, which is like our info hub. So we have our L&D, we have our well-being, we have our what else we have our kind of events. So you can actually have a rotating calendar, so you can actually see much more around. It's just much easier and much nicer to be able to have one. Yeah, exactly. And again, it's, when you do that, look at that kind of prioritization piece about what you put in first, it's, it's very kind of reading the room around that.
Certainly. Okay, so touching upon the three topics that we kind of mentioned, obviously I think we have discussed all three of them at some point, but just to give an overview. So the first topic, first point was, what is HR and what value can it bring? I think from our perspective, like you said earlier, HR has always been seen as kind of the negative sort of team within a business. It's always been like, oh God, HR is coming.
They haven't understood the value, I don't think. And I think it's about educating people on what value it can add to a business.
Because they are more collaborative than anything else.
Just implementing those processes, implementing those strategies, looking at the bigger picture. I think they provide an instrumental part of growth of any business. And without them, really, you just need that little bit of kind of red tape, if you like. I think
you're seeing that, aren't we? Because now that there's many more kind of senior positions, and I think that's because that without that, those kind of conversations around kind of succession planning and scaling and different touch points, and to be able to bring accountability to board meetings as well.
It's my experience, that always kind of fell within an operations role or within an office management role. And I think the more we kind of delve into the specifics over the years, it really has come quite evident that it's a need for a particular talent person to look at that succession planning and that growth period, and look at that HR person to look at the kind of the L&D side and the coaching side and the development side of things. It really is such an important and integral part of any kind of business, especially one that's looking to scale up so rapidly, like so many of these companies, particularly within Cambridge, within the tech and software space are.
So definitely, I truly believe HR is a core element to any business. I'm sure we'd all agree. So are you thinking of scaling up, and how can HR support? I think there's a variety of ways that like the HR function can support. It's again, like you mentioned, it's setting up the processes, the platforms, all of the kind of the behind the scenes stuff, but it's also a case of that research in regards to the benefits and what's going to make your business attractive and what's going to retain the staff and kind of keeping that culture. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Kirsty, but yeah, I think
it's not being afraid to kind of challenge the status quo either.
Yeah.
And so we had a kind of a series of benefits that just weren't being used. We were using kind of perk box and we were using various kind of discounts, etc. And it just wasn't being used. And so at the end of last year, kind of raised that very much to the ground and actually have now partnered with eLife. And they've been absolutely brilliant. And so we can now offer kind of, you know, life insurance. We can offer critical life and critical insurance as well as kind of things. I mean, it's all a little dark, but will writing and you know, other things like that. But actually also but it's a platform, and also that you can kind of earn points as well. So, you know, you go out, you take exercise and you can earn points, and then you end up with, you know, vouchers to be able to spend. So yeah, I've got kind of 70 quid to spend at John Lewis at some point. So it's, I know.
Not bad at all.
I mean, yeah, so it's great.
But yeah, that is something that like benefits from a candidate point of view is actually really important. You know, when we speak to candidates, of course they want to know about the business and about the culture, but also a big thing now, a big pain factor for many candidates is the benefits. What benefits are they offering? You know, people aren't looking for a quick, they're looking for like kind of that long-term, you know, like the pension, health,
absolutely. And we changed our pension providers because of that as well, and what we would deliver, you know, what our offer. You have to be able to listen, and I think you just mentioned it, benchmarking is really important, and to be able to really make sure that you're actually aligned with the market is key.
Okay, perfect. And then the final point was the difference between HR and talent acquisition. So I think talent acquisition professionals are predominantly going to be looking at how to grow, you know, and how to bring in great talent and looking at the market. HR is obviously going to be implementing the more kind of strategic and operational side of the business. I don't know if you'd agree, Kirsty?
No, well, I think I
guess, aren't you?
I think also, if you're going to be bringing in a talent person, the most impactful platform that you need to be able to make sure you can afford is Recruiter, LinkedIn Recruiter. And you need to be able to budget for that because it's not cheap, but that is the fundamental platform to be able to do any recruitment off. I mean, literally, we don't use anything else. So that's really. So
is that how you attract all of your potential candidates? Is
pretty much. Yeah. I mean, we have advertised through other platforms over the years, but we use Recruity as our recruitment platform. So that's a really kind of cost-effective way. I think as you scale, you can bring in kind of greenhouse, etc. But actually, it's been great for us to be able to use that as an ATS.
Okay, perfect. Do you have anything?
Well, no, just if you're going to open up, we've had some questions throughout, but if there are any other kind of questions that people want to pop in and ask, please feel free to do so. I think we've touched on pretty much all kind of challenges, haven't we, in different sizes of business, and kind of how to kind of implement things at different times, you know, in your journey. I mean, what stage are you at now, Kirsty, in terms of kind of growth, where you are and your continued journey at Techspert?
Yeah, so we are at this kind of interesting stage of kind of consolidating, but I don't know, is there such a thing? So we have had quite a kind of static team for quite some time. Our turnover, our attrition rate is very low, which is great. And we are looking at opening up another location at some point. That would be great. And then obviously we're looking at our kind of next funding round in due course as well. So that's kind of super exciting.
Perfect. Oh, it's all exciting. Very exciting. Just looking at the Q&As, obviously if you have any questions, please do throw them in before we kind of close off. So the question here is, people versus HR versus TA ? So I'm kind of assuming that does it mean, do we bring in people first, then HR, then talent? I don't know.
I think probably people in HR are pretty much the same thing. It just depends on the title. I think the classic term of HR, people are kind of moving away from that because of human resources. People aren't a resource, and I think that's kind of just been a bit more of a kind of change in mindset, not necessarily around the function, but just the way that people are kind of engaging. So, but yeah, everybody's got their own.
Changing. We're getting we're seeing more and more roles out there, and more job titles being changed to people advisor, people director,
and culture roles. It's people and culture managers. That's a big job.
Well, see, it's interesting. I think that's really interesting, and it's something that I'm not entirely comfortable, because culture doesn't sit with one person. Culture is actually, it needs to be kind of championed from the top, if you want, from the kind of the C-level, from the founder, and you've got to be able to engage and own the culture, because it's all around those kind of behaviors. So I saw there was one called culture director, and I thought, but what about everybody else? Because everybody's got to be able to build into that narrative.
Totally. Okay, well, I don't think we've got any more questions at the moment, but obviously if you come up with any questions after, please do let us know, pop us an email. We can get those answered and get those back to you. Of course, we'll send the recording out to you all. But thank you very much, Kirsty.
Thanks for
joining us and sharing.
Nice to see you.
Your knowledge with us. I've had fun. Hopefully all the information has been useful to you. I know it's quite difficult, obviously, not knowing what to implement first, but we're here for any further
if you need any kind of help with benchmarking or any of the beyond recruitment piece, we're obviously here to have a chat with you. And if you you want to link in with Kirsty, feel free to link in with her. But if you have any further questions, please just send them through, and we'll get this recording out to you. I think it's in the morning that will be sent out.
But no, thank you all very much for joining, and have a lovely day. Take care.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.